Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today we have the honor and the pleasure of having with us Professor Mbare Ngom. Professor Mbare Ngom earned a doctorate in Ibero-American Studies and a diplôme d'etudes approfondis from the University of Paris-Sorbonne, following a degree in international studies from the School of Diplomacy in Madrid. He is a professor of Spanish and French at Morgan State University in Baltimore, and also currently serves as the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at that university. He is a former Fulbright Fellow of Peru and a National Endowment for the Humanities recipient in Mexico. And his research focuses on Black cultural production in Latin America and the Caribbean, and on African Hispanic literary studies. He is the author of a number of books, many books, including more closely related to the lecture that he's going to give today, Antología de la literatura afro-peruana, so Anthology of Afro-Peruvian Literature, published in 2016. And he also edited a volume called Escribir, la identidad, creación cultural y negritud en el Perú, so writing identity, cultural creation and negritud in Peru from 2008. The title of his talk is Pancho Fierro, Pictorial Representations of Black Experiences in Peru. So we are going to see lots of slides, right, with the pictorial work of this Afro-Peruvian artist. And this event has been made possible through the co-sponsorship at Hofstra of different units and departments, including the Latin American Caribbean Studies Program, the Department of Romance Languages and Literatures, the First Year Connections Program, the Center for Race, Culture, and Social Justice, and also the Hofstra Cultural Center. So let's welcome Professor Mbare Ngom.
Good afternoon. Come on, guys. Good afternoon. Okay, now it sounds better. Okay, thank you for all of you for coming. And before I just begin this exchange, this conversation, I just would like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Benita San Pedro and Professor Miguel Angel Zapata, and the department and the unit that have been really cited here that really contributed to this invitation. Know that it is a great honor and a privilege for me to be here and share a few remarks with you and engage in a dialogue. So I'll be giving a quiz at the end, so don't go, okay? You stay put. Just kidding. I'll be asking 2 questions, and so just pay attention to the slides. I'll be just try to go quickly above over the slides, you know. So the Black experience, that I call, in my research, I call it the trans-African experience. But here, I'm just going to use the term Black experience. Goes as far back as, can be traced as far back as the first voyage, exploration and conquest of the Western Hemisphere by European, mostly Spaniards, and Portuguese to a lesser extent. And it's the first Black people, in this case, some of them enslaved or not, arrived in what was then known as Tawantinsuyo. Tawantinsuyo is the name of the Inca Empire. That's how it was called. So, and they accompanied the expedition of Francisco Pizarro, that arrived to Peru in around 1530. During the first phase of the contact, I mean European and the Americas, African in different capacity played a role in the exploration, conquest of what was then described by Spaniards as a New World, El Nuevo Mundo. And they played a role in the exploration and the conquest, as I indicated, and throughout the history of enslavement, and also during the colonial situation, and also in the early years of the first Latin American Republic. They played a role in and developed a wide range of strategies to resist and survive aggression and oppression by creating what I would call spaces of expression during the time frame I've just mentioned, and also spaces of expression in what would become their country of citizenship later on in as the colonial situation developed. So out of the let me just go back. Out of the 543 millions inhabitants of Latin America and the Caribbean, around 180 million are of African descent. Now here, there are some discrepancies because different sources say different things. I've seen anywhere between 150 million to 200 millions of trans-African in Latin America and the Caribbean. So, consequently, African descendants represent one of the largest ethnic groups in the Western Hemisphere, but their concentration and high density depends on where they are. Because it is, if we, in the Caribbean basin, there is a high concentration. Sometime it may go as far as 90%, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and if you go to Brazil, it is even it is higher, because Brazil is the second largest black community in the world. It means that Brazil has more blacks than 99% of African countries. The only country that is ahead of Brazil is Nigeria, with 200 million inhabitants. But other than that, every single country in sub-Saharan Africa comes behind Brazil. That is close to 92 million inhabitants. 92 million, I'm just being very conservative because it all depends on how you identify yourself. And I can give you an example. I was a member of the delegation to Brazil around 2006. It was the White House Initiative. And the US University and the government of the United States were trying to increase the presence of Afro-Brazilian at the university here in the US in terms of coming with scholarship. And there was a lawsuit in one of the major, in a federal court in Brasilia. And the person who was a lady who had filed the lawsuit was blonde with blue eyes. But she said she had African ancestry. No one could say the contrary, but that's what she said. So that's why I say who identifies us, And the lawsuit went on. I'm not sure what the outcome was. So identification is really very important. And so this African presence, as I just indicated, was very important and impacted, as you can see from this quote, practically every single country south of the United States border, right? But what is missing, in most cases, are statistics. Because they don't agree, I'm not sure whether you can see it, unfortunately, but because many countries and even international organizations have different statistics and do not agree on the percentage of people of African descent in some of these countries. And so you can see here the Organization of American States, as I indicated earlier, I said 180, but the Organization of American States indicates 200 million of Afro-descendant, whereas the Inter-American Development Bank stats reach 150 million. So even in the countries, there is discrepancy. For example, if you look at Colombia, they say 10%. That's the official figure. But Colombian non-government organizations say that there are 20% of Afro-Colombian because they do grassroots work. In Peru, you can see it reads 5.2. But Peruvian NGO organization, grassroots movement, say that there are 10% of Afro-Peruvian. And so this would be a very great research project for you guys, who is right, and what is the stats we need to work with in terms of, and there are some countries like Argentina that reach 0%, and that's not the case. Or Uruguay, they say that the Switzerland of Latin America, and you still have a practice like candomblé in Uruguay, and candomblé is, as far as I know, comes from Africa. And so all of those stats needs to be reconciled regarding the African presence or the trans-African presence in Latin America. So in Peru, as you can see, approximately 2.5, but it ranges from 2 to 10%. Etc. And they are located, namely, in these areas. I'm not sure whether you can see it, but along the coast. And, mostly in Lima, in some neighborhood of Lima, Callao, La Victoria. Callao is a city near Lima, and the province as well, constitutional province. And in the north and in the south, where you had plantations. And so it is not that you have concentration, large concentration, but they are just scattered if you look at the map. I'm sorry that the printing is just very, very small. You might not be able to, but I can send it to Professor San Pedro. She can share it with you. So in 1530, Francisco Pizarro, Spanish Francisco Pizarro, sailed from Panama to explore, eventually conquered the territory further south on the Pacific coast, on the Pacific side of South America. His approximately 200-man expedition landed in what is today Ecuador, which was part of the Inca Empire that was called Tahuantinsuyo. I think that is the 5 corners in Quechua. Pizarro's expedition also included black Ladinos. What is a Ladino? These were Christianized and decultured, if you will, or accultured blacks. Because keep in mind that the first African who were taken from Africa who did not come to America but went to Spain, right? And they were in the area of Seville. They served as servant in houses because they didn't have plantation in Spain, like here. And so then some of them were sent to the Americas, but they accompanied their expeditions. And so they are the so-called Ladino. They knew Western culture, well, what we could, if we can call it Western culture. And they served on this expedition as servant, as assistant, very few of them as enslaved. It all depends also of perspective. And if you look at the conquest of the exploration of Florida, what was called the territory of Florida, it was not Florida, it was South Carolina all the way to Texas. That's what was called El Territorio de la Florida. And one of the leading expedition scouts, Estebanico, was black, but he just appears as Estebanico, literally. So that's why in the early part, they were an integral part of the adventure of conquest. But two of them were identified by name. In the expedition of Pizarro. One of them was Juan Garcia, born in Castilla la Vieja, who was a musician and a crier. And the other one was Miguel Ruiz, born in Sevilla. And he was described as hombre a caballo. So that which gives him a certain status, because enslaved African would not ride a horse. But Miguel Ruiz was hombre a caballo. And so that's how it reads in the Chronicle of the Indies, so if you will. Actually, these individuals were just an integral part of the expedition. So the territory of how Spain organized the territorial control of the Americas. They relied on one vast, what I would call a large administrative and territorial unit called virreinato, viceroyalty. And that was subdivided into what I would call sub-region called audiencias, and the military branch would be the captaincy. But the viceroyalties, there were two of them in the early stages. One was Nueva España, and the other one was Peru. Nueva España was Mexico and half of the United States, if you will. That was the viceroyalty of Nueva España. And so probably even beyond Texas, if you look at the map, because the US didn't exist anyway. There was just a land there, but if you look at the map, the way it was designed, it went as far. So, but the viceroyalty of Peru, Virreinato del Perú, was one of the largest and most important and powerful territorial entities of the Spanish Empire of the America. It played a central role in the emerging mining industry, but also the emerging slave plantation economy, even though the plantation economy was more important in the Caribbean than in Peru. But the problem with Peru was that Peru didn't have a direct interaction with Europe or with Africa because it was on the Pacific side. And so if you look at it, practically most of South America, except for Brazil, was in the viceroyalty of Peru. Obviously, the Spaniards may have designed this map, but they didn't have the human resources to cover all of this territory. Eventually, in 1776, the viceroyalty of Peru would be split. One would become the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, and the other one, Peru. And the one further north would be divided into the viceroyalty of Nueva Granada and Nueva España. And pay attention to the name, New, something that was in Spain. New Spain, New Granada, etc. So to recreate the world they left behind. So by all the goods and human cargo, enslaved African who would go to Peru would transit through two harbors. One, Cartagena de Indias, in what is today Colombia, and the other through smuggling from Buenos Aires, Rio de la Plata. And so what does it mean? It means that there was a high loss rate when we are talking about, mostly when we are talking about enslaved people, because some of them would come by land. We are talking about thousands of miles. In the 16th, 17th century, just think, walking. You think, so the high loss rate. So in 1550, there were 3,000 enslaved Africans in Peru alone, half of them in the city of Lima. The 1593 census conducted by the Archdiocese of Lima recorded a population of 12,800 souls, out of which 7,000 were black. So which means that half of the population of Lima was black in the 17th century. And just to give you, and finally, in 1614, the census requested by the Viceroy, Marquis de Monteclaro, breaks down as follows: 12,000 peninsulares, Spaniards, as they call them, peninsulares, and 11,000 blacks. And out of them, 2,000 soul, as they were quoted, were Native American or Indios. That's the term they use. So this brings us to the object of our presentation today. Which is Francisco Fierro de Palas, also known as Pancho Fierro. He was born to an enslaved woman and a Criollo priest from a well-to-do family of Lima. So his birth date year kind of also, we have several dates, 1803, 1807, 1809. But my research, the date that has been more, at least cited, is 1807. So he was a self-taught watercolor painter, in Spanish, acuarelista, so he painted on aquarela, but also in English they say aquarelle, coming from French. And he, whose professional career spanned over 55 decades, 50 years. At the peak of his career in the 1850s, he was compared to Spain master painter Francisco de Goya. And he came to be described as, quote, the most famous Peruvian artist of the century, unquote. According to José Sabogal, a prominent 19th century Peruvian artist, Francisco Fierro did not receive any formal education in the art. He found his inspiration by conducting close and sustained observation of Lima urban life. So he's basically what he was doing is just to look at what was happening in the street of Lima, people, type, character, and he used that to at least to as the theme for his work. But one of the things that one of the point I would like to raise here is how his body of work is fragmented and dispersed. It may be found at different locations in Peru, around the world, including public and private museums like Museo del Banco Central del Perú, Pinacoteca Municipal Merino de la Municipalidad de Lima, the National Library in Paris, the Academy of Science in Leningrad, Russia, and then the Hispanic Society of America here in New York, in London, as well as in private collections. So you see, it's all over the place. And to even make the situation even more challenging for researchers, there have been many replicas, many copies, unauthorized copies of his work. And so he really never got to live off the dividend of his painting. From the 1850s through the end of the century, businessmen, European tourists, diplomats, sailors, and other travelers visiting Lima acquired his painting. That's why it just started literally spreading around the world. And one of the famous writers, Ricardo Palma, got a donation of his painting. Now, what he did was, in addition to buying more painting, he also exchanged, like this baseball card or football card, exchanging. That's what he also did. At some point, he had 238 pieces, work of from Pancho Fierro. The Leningrad collection has 78, pieces. So it is a real challenge for us researchers to look at the work in a very global perspective. We can only have a perspective on a slice of work. So for this presentation, I used the Leningrad collection because I was fortunate in one of my trips to Lima. There was a book fair, and they were selling a collection of the Leningrad collection, and I could purchase it. And the other collection comes from Lima, from the museum, Municipal Museum of Lima, and some from the Hispanic Society. So I did not, his work didn't draw a lot of attention, but he was described as costumbrista. The costumbrismo movement is a movement that was mostly focused, it was mostly a literary movement that focused on local characters. Painting what you see, painting customs, painting how people celebrate. And Pancho Fierro was one of the masters of this local character. And not only that, he also was one of the first authors in the 19th century to focus on portrait painting. But the tradition of portrait painting comes from as far back of the 17th century. I'm not sure whether if you have heard about the El Señor de los Milagros. This is a painting by a former Angolan enslaved person who paint a black saint, at least a black, let me call it saint, on a wall in the neighborhood of Pachacamilla in Lima. There was an earthquake in 1651, I believe. Everything around the building crumbled, except that wall. And so El Señor de los Milagros now is being worshipped everywhere in the world. Actually, there is, it is this month, the month of October, where they celebrate him. So El Señor de los Milagros was the how do I call it, the starting point of portrait painting in Peru. But Pancho Fierro took it to the next level. Pancho Fierro kind of seems to be like a breakaway line, a dividing line between the process, the portrait painting from the 17th century into the 19th century, because their portrait painting focused more on religion, religious figures, saints, right, and what do you call, and bishops, Archbishop of Lima, and you will see some painting here. What he did was to create what Quigley calls a pictorial narrative or a pictorial language. He created a visual language that enabled him to start narrating what the street of Lima. So he started looking at customs, the way people behave. And Lima, at that point, in the 19th century, was a place where people would go, mostly in the center of Lima, to see and to be seen. And Pancho Fierro, what he does here is to look at women's fashion, manta y saya. So here, what was famous there at that point, the manta y saya fashion was la tapada. And the French diplomat said that he was shocked by the way Limeñas dressed. The saya, a fine and silk-long dress, brown, blue, black, or another color, that was adjustable to the body. And the manto was a black covered upper part of the body, silk, that only allowed the woman to see with one eye. As you can see from the, let me just go a few. And so you see, all you see just one eye. And see, this was for, number one, to preserve chastity of women. But only women from the upper society were allowed to be tapadas. Enslaved women, enslaved black women could not. But sometimes the system, as you can see from the picture on your right, I would think, this lady from the upper class, accompanied by her assistant, her servant, but the servant, black, is open face, if you can see it, right? But sometimes women were also, as you can see, all of these are just what Pancho Fierro was trying to show here is how fashionable women in Lima were. So here I'm just giving the costumbrista aspect of Pancho Fierro's system. So he's talking about fashion here, but as you can see, the system was not perfect because this is a black woman who has also found a way to be una tapada, but she's using the cover of a hat, as you can see. And religion also played a very important role in Peru, 19th century Peru. And Pancho Fierro, mostly in the latter part of the colony, taking into account that the three major powers in colonial Latin America was the state, the Criollo establishment, and the church, right? And the different orders of the church. What Pancho Fierro did was also by showing the different religious orders through their tunics, what they was wearing, to show how present religion was still in the first republic of Peru at that time. And you can see here different, but he also mocked the church, as you can see on the second, on the slide on your right. And so you had different congregations that were present in that space in the First Republic. We are talking about republic, you know, a non-religious state, but religion was still present there. And so Pancho Fierro, what he did was just to canvas society and show, because costumbrismo means customs, how people live their lives, what the society looked like at some point. So he looked like the elite, the Criolla elite. Because when we are talking about Peruanidad, Peruvianness, what comes to mind is the elite, the Criollo elite, the hegemonic Criollo elite, not the native, not the blacks. You know, they were there, but invisible. And so Pancho Fierro shows how the elite lived. But if you look at it, blacks were always present. If you look at the servant who are following this promenade, if you will, we still have it here. You know, the elite, but you see still black showing, but they are invisible. They were invisible, but Pancho Fierro, what he does is to foreground them. You know, he put them on the front so they would see that there is Peruvianness is not monolithic, as we will see also in the other side. So he's showing also a burial. A very I'm not sure whether burial can be described as luxurious, but you see there is a lot of pomp here. Always the Criollo elite here. So he was, as he was described, one of the iconic figures of visual costumbrismo. And what he did, as I indicated here, is as scholar Harker Fuller writes, quote, Fierro's painting formed a significant visual and historical record of Peru's slave society, as well as a testament to the effect of the War of Independence on the new republic, Lima aristocratic world, and the relationship among the aristocrats, slave, the indigenous people, and other groups. So as you've seen, just what we just showed here, that is the direction. But he also showed the high society, dance. And here he's talking about, look at the title, Zamacueca Elite Criolla. So he's already segmenting, you know, dance. So he is the upper class dancing popular dance, literally. But dance here has been socialized and classified, if you like. Because here you have the same dance described as Zamacueca Popular. The very same dance, same music. Right? And here he goes on and says Zamacueca Negra. We go further level down, down further. And so if you look at the movement, what is the difference? What is the difference? So by bringing this popular tradition to the foreground, what Pancho Fierro did was to bring out this other constituent of Peruvianness, Peruanidad, right? And those other constituents, those other popular celebration or practices include bullfighting. That was imported from Spain and was supposed to be a white practice or activity. But what Pancho Fierro was to Africanize it. Well, not Africanize it by painting, black figures. No, he included them into the process of bullfighting because they were present. They were engaged in bullfighting, as you can see in these these slides of bullfighters in action who are black. Huh? And were fighting on horse, what they call capeador. And so these are the gaps. When Fuller talks about historical record, this is what he's talking about, to fill in those gaps in the history of Peru. Okay. And Peru achieved independence in 1821. Peru achieved independence in 1821, but slavery was not abolished until 1854. The Constitution of Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, shows those gaps of 20-something years, during which the Carta Magna, the Constitution, stipulate that all citizens are equal. And yet, a very important segment of the citizenry that didn't have their own fundamental right. So, these two pictures of Peruvian soldiers, one courting a street vendor, the other dancing La Marinera. Read it, flip the coin. These soldiers, we are talking about 1821, fought for their country, shed their blood, and yet did not have rights. So you have to go beyond the picture, beyond what you see at face value. Right? And so you see them wearing uniform. So you see them, how Pancho Fierro, so Pancho Fierro did not do, this was not a direct attack. He used burlesque scenes, daily scenes, at least scenes that apparently are irrelevant, to tell another version of the history of Peru. That not only the criollos, right, defended the national or territorial integrity and sovereignty of Peru. There were also blacks who participated in the struggle for freedom. And the interesting thing is that the two sides recruited black to fight in what they call the Civil War, and promised freedom. But at the end of the process, they reneged on their promises. So, not only soldiers, but you also had the irregular troop, the Montenegro. Black, you can see him on a horse ride. They also participated in the war. These were just like, I hate to use the word mercenary, but they were members of the irregular troop. You know, they participated in the struggle for freedom of Peru. So they believed in their country. But not only that, they were also patriotic. They participated, they marched up behind the Peruvian flag. Look at the date, 1821. What happened in 1821? Huh? Independence. When was slavery abolished? 1854. So they are showing patriotism even though their rights were suspended or violated. And so that's what you have in the second slide. You see them celebrating. Celebrating. And so this is what I'm just talking about as the discrepancy between the Carta Magna and the fact, the Constitution. So, and again, these are street scenes. Pancho Fierro sought and got and found his inspiration by just walking through the street of Lima. And so, he also showed how Afro-Colombian also did open create a new space in the economy of Lima, they created, for example, Christine Hannefeld described the role and impact of the black population on the local economy as trade workers and vendors. And this involved men and women. They performed critical tasks and activity, including collecting wood, water during the war for the army and the civilian population. And this is also another expression of their patriotism. Others, because urban slavery in Lima would allow the master, quote unquote, would allow the enslaved person to be a jornalero. Jornalero is a day worker. He or she would go out, work, get daily earnings, and come and split the earning with the master. And so all of that was part of that economy. But what Pancho Fierro did in the next slide I'll be showing is how the insertions of black, or integration of black, into the urban economic system. They engaged, like here, fruit vendors in the street in a wide range of activities. They offered a wide range of product and delivered primary need goods, including food, water, milk, among others, as street vendors or as door-to-door. And so Amazon came in late because they were doing home delivery, I'm sorry. But home delivery started right here because they were delivering fish, fresh fish, and fresh fruit to our homes. We didn't have cell phone, but they found a way of doing it to cater the need of the local neighborhood. And other services included housekeeping. Housekeeping, for example, they call the lavanderas. They would come, pick up dirty laundry, take it to the river, wash it, and bring it down later. All of that was part of this urban economy, So they were here. Tamaleros, those who know tamales, who go to Mexico. Well, the Peruvian tamal is different from the Mexican tamal, The turenero, those who love sweets, right? And so all of this was part of this is heladero, ice vendor. And you see that written without an H. I will get back to you. The flower vendor, right? And the candle vendor. Candle was very important because that's the only lighting you had for home and for whatever you would do after night. Right? And the mat vendor in the house over the dirt floor. And the wood vendor. The yerbatero, herbs vendor. And the aguador. We didn't have running water. Someone had to go and fetch the water from somewhere and bring it to the home and deliver it. That was home delivery as well. And here, also aguador, but to water plants. That's why he's, pouring the water to the floor. And here, the tisanera. You didn't have these tea bags. So she would come with the herbs for you to make your tea, any type of infusion, that lady. And also, tamalera, a burro. And look at how it's written in Spanish for those who are coming from linguistics or social linguistics or looking at the language, Spanish language. And gallinera. So look at the word, again, for those who are coming from social linguistics. So is it gallinera where you keep them or the gallinera where you carry them? So that's a very interesting topic for them. And so these were home delivery, And she would sell the chicken, kill them, plug them, and just kind of clean it up and give it to you. You would come, you would select it while it's still alive, and she would do the rest. By the time you get it, it will be just ready for the pot or to be fried. And also, they were in the drinking business, mostly women. They are the one who were the chicheras. Chicha is a corn beer. It's very, very strong. I don't drink, but my friends just are attest to it. You know, after session, they will just drop. But anyway, I'm just kidding, but it happened on more than one occasion. But anyway, so you see, the chicheras, women, you know, were owners of the chicheras. And they knew the strategic point where to sell the chicha. And also, you had the other profession, like calicero, you know, the cart driver. You know, like a more relaxed, quote unquote, job. And you also have individuals who are in transportation of goods, like on the left-hand side, and of spirits on the right-hand side. The one on your left side, yes, your left side, would transport spirits, aguardiente, right? And also transportation of goods, just goods. So as you can see, this is a very significant presence, economic presence in the urban environment that is not reflected in books, or at least the research hasn't shown it yet. But Pancho Fierro, right, through observation, was able to articulate a visual narrative, a pictorial narrative of the Black presence in Peruanidad. What he did was to show that Peruvianness is not monolithic. Peruvianness is diverse, right? And was enriched by this other contribution, such as cockfighting. And you see here also this whole ceremony going to the cockfighting ring. There was music, and you see where the cock is being transported in this cage, very nice cage. This was also another industry that would generate income because people would bet. And so this speaks to the ingenuity of these Peruvian of African descent in the 18th century, during a transition of moving from the colonial situation into nation building. What would Peru be? What would it look like? And also these popular spaces. And you see that in the soldiers' slide, I talk about Amancais. Amancais is still a district that is more or less intact, even though all the around have been, occupied. But this was a space where people would go to have fun, to have picnic, etc. And you see that these Black groups, population or citizens, still find a way to also be part of the culture of détente, the culture of entertainment, the culture of relaxation with the family, you know. And popular culture, traditional celebration, right? The sounds of the devil. These were called like pagan celebration by the establishment, but they are part of Peruvian culture. This is part of popular culture. This is what also is part of what defines Peru. Here's the devil's dance, also part of this celebration. All of this was captured by Pancho Fierro to show the contribution of Black, and see the same. And finally, the other constituent, the Indian character, quote unquote. They put it in quote, but it say Indian. And here, in the text, they say Indio, but they write it with a Y. They write it with a Y, Yindia. So, and again, this I'll get back to it quickly. But as you can see, he says that Indio de viaje. And in the other one, he says Indio puro de la montaña. I'll come to this inscription later, you know. And here, in every of these slide, he is careful. He always label it Indio this, Indio that. But if you look at the previous slide, he does not identify the blacks. He doesn't say Negro and this and that. I did put it in the title, but in his labeling, he does not identify them. So, but here he does. And another one, but here is La Rabona. This is also another native, but La Rabona is a very important character. These women fought in the war. They fought in the front line. They were, supporting the troops that were at war. And also they just became obscure figures of the history of Peru. But Pancho Fierro recovered them, even though they are not Afro-Peruvian. But again, he was a costumbrista, a painter. And here he says, Cholo. I am the one who put Cholo swimmers in Sorillo. But Cholo is another category, right? In the race mixture in Peru, right? Swimming. And so, this is also part of the street observation, suertero. It's lottery. But they say that suertero is the one who gives you luck. And so you have to go to see him, because before I read this label, and I was making the presentation, I thought that the gentleman was a letter writer that you would find a few years back, different places, they would come to a place, have someone write a letter before email, and with a typewriter or even writing. But no, this is another scene. We are talking about 1830. Lottery. Right? In the 21st century, you see it, but you probably just think of it. No technology, nothing, but still you had lottery. And so this is part of costumbrismo, how people live their lives. But so this is Pancho Fierro in his late years. Here, before closing, Pancho Fierro was illiterate, and why I'm saying that? On the one hand, he never signed his works. That's why there were a lot of replica. Number two, he didn't sign his work, but he did put titles or description. But those description and titles were full of typos and grammatical errors. And those are title or description. That's what helped us sometimes understand what the painting are about. That's what Jeanette called the paratext. That are all these elements that surround the text, but that gives us information about about what we are reading. In this case, the painting or a novel. In a short story, it may be a picture, a photo, a drawing, illustration. Those are the paratexts. They populate the surrounding of the text, in this case, the painting. And so each of these paintings has a legend in it, not at the bottom, but in the on the paper. Remember that aquarelle doesn't use canvas, it uses paper. It uses paper, right? And so that is another characteristic that also sets Pancho Fierro apart, right? Not a title, I don't sign it, but I write a story if you want to. I write a description that helps you understand. For example, the one with the lottery player, before I read, again, as I said it, before I read the description or the title, I thought it was a letter writer. But the woman is picking the numbers. Is picking the number. That is also part of the popular tradition, right? Pancho Fierro died in 1879 at age 71. He was paralyzed when he died, And thank you very much. If you have any question. So, yes, sir, and here. Well, thank you for your question. I think that I was having a conversation with Professor Zapata. We're talking precisely about that, a new course. But one thing is, show intellectual curiosity and try to do your research. And you can begin probably by, number one, just going to the Organization of American States, the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, that here in the US. But the most important thing, and you guys have that opportunity, is to get abroad, to apply for a research grant and say, okay, let me go to Mexico. First of all, you make the contact, Professor San Pedro, Professor Zapata, and here have contact there. And if not, well, you have my connections through Professor San Pedro. And if I don't know, I have another connection. That's how networking works. But number one, I really try to get as much reading as possible. There are good centers. Actually, in New York, you have the Hutchins Center at Harvard. And where is Harvard? Harvard is not in New York. It's in Massachusetts, I believe, right? You have the Hutchins Center, the Afro-Latin American Research something Institute. You can begin there. They have fellowships. And the next step would be, once you get at least information, you see what part you would like to focus on, which country or which areas or which sub-region, right? Apply for a grant. Apply for a Fulbright for students, mostly when you are heading towards the master's. You can spend a whole year, 6 months, 8 months, all expenses paid for, if your application is approved. And then you are gaining experience. You can do a dual approach, sir. You can say, okay, I'm going to go and teach English as a second language, or I'm going to go and be an English teaching assistant, and then do the research parallelly. When I started to do my research in Peru, because I was going back and forth, I said, this is not going to work. I applied for a Fulbright, a faculty Fulbright. So I was teaching, and then I was doing my research. Because I was just teaching at 2 universities. I was teaching one course here, one course there. And for Fulbright, it was too much. Because they say you are there to do research. You just need to teach one course, but I want you to have experience in the classroom. But I built a network. And that network allowed me to not only go to Peru every year or every 2 years, because whenever they organize something, they call me, they invite me, to go and contribute. And those networks allowed me to organize 2 Fulbright Hays programs. Fulbright Hays is that you get a grant and you recruit people, and you take them. Because if I didn't have that network, I would never have been able to do that. But you also need it as a student, but also as a future professional, whether a faculty, whether a business person, whatever you're going to do, you need those contacts. So begin with the Hutchins Center, work with your professors here. I can share the information I have, but begin by looking at the Hutchins Center. What do they have? And also in New York, they have the Schomburg Center for the Arts, I believe, in Harlem or something. And you might find something there. I'm not sure whether if it is focused on African American only, but I believe that those are areas. But you can go anywhere. Remember what I said it in the other class. At no other time in your life, you will find so many resources at hand in one place. At no other time. You may be a CEO of whatever, but it will be of Delta Airline. It will be of Amazon. That's just resources that are focused. But here you have it all. Just find where they are. And that, sir, will enable you say, okay, I'm going to go and look at the Afro-Mexican experience. That is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans, 'Mexicans' now are looking into it. Now that is a very, 'Mexicans' now are looking into it. Now that is a very, 'Mexicans' now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans now are looking into it. Now that is a very hot topic now, because Mexicans like they say in New York, in what do you call Wall Street, it's a hot commodity. And then you can begin there, you can go, or Brazil, if it's even more obvious. And then you learn Portuguese if you don't speak Portuguese, you know. So those are what I can share with you. I'm not sure whether I answered your question, but if I answered your question or not. Okay. Oh, the two questions. I'm glad that the quiz. Take out those papers, write your name and the class. Just got you. But anyway, the question is, what caught your attention in all of the slides I have shown? Okay, what caught your attention? Okay, yes, sir.
It wasn't one of these slides that you showed. It was one of the first slides with like the percentages of population and then how much like the African descent in the population of the countries. I noticed, and then you like touched upon like Argentina. That reminded me, that one caught my attention because I remember when like the World Cup was happening. There was an article published, I think it was like in the New York Times, that was like discussing like why Argentina and I think like Uruguay were like some of the only Latin American countries with like the least amount of players of African descent on their roster. And there was like a whole like pushback to that article. Like there were a lot of people that were like, oh, these Americans, they don't understand like the demographics and stuff. I was wondering, I don't know if Argentina is not like your specialty because I know this was like about Peru, but I mean,
No, you touched a very important point. I'll get back to you. Okay, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, you know, that these countries that are actually, they call themselves the Europe of Latin America, you know, when they have this black population. Very good point, you know. Yes? Repeat your point. Use the mic, please. Yeah.
What caught my attention was, except for the two pictures of the funeral and the bullfighting ring, it was just a picture of the subjects.
Okay. All right. Yes, you are close enough, so I'm going to hold my comment, my response. Okay, what else? What else? Okay, sorry, Professor.
The name, sorry. The heladero without the H, I don't know if that's a big deal, but you mentioned it. I don't know if you were, it's just the lack of education on his part, or there's something else there? Mm-hmm. I'm just curious.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comment regarding something that caught your attention? Okay, the figure of the Rabona. Okay, that's good. Say it again.
The dance, the Samacueca.
As the Samacueca, okay. Yeah. And, okay. So, you're very close to what I was looking for. No landscapes. No landscape. And even in the case, and so there is no location, no connection. You talked about the background. There is one that was very blurry. That's good. But there is no landmark. if you look at the picture, there is no landmark, and most of the characters are not captured face to face. They are captured in a side way, but they are not captured. And most of them are captured in movement, except for the peanut vendor, etc. But the most important part here is the lack of landmark. We don't know the location. We know that he observed what was happening on the streets of Lima, but we don't see any street. You see, he kind of, as if he had just kind of cleaned up the street and just posted them in a space without any location and any distinctive, that could label us. Even in the case of, if you look at it here, in this, you see, no background, no environment, no trees, no building. Nothing. The only place that where there are two places where we could have perhaps said that there was a location, but it was just very generic. Number one is here. I put Chorrillos, but it took me 3 different slides before I could see Chorrillos. But otherwise, it could be any body of water. Generic. Right? And the other is was this I hope I didn't pass it. I was looking at the bullfighting ring. I guess that I left it behind. The bullfighting ring, it's just very generic. Could be any bullfighting ring. Right? So this is one of the characteristics of Pancho Fierro that really, that where the research come in, the gentleman has left, but to try to find out why there is not like this affective connection to a place. Because place is very important. But now, it is true, my theory is that at least as it relates to characters, that Pancho Fierro, even though he represented some types, those are collective types. They represent a whole ethnicity, a whole group, a whole citizenry. Right? But this is something that is really very, very, very interesting. So you're very, very, very close. You touched it. Perhaps you say it in a different way, but that's what it is, And it's very easy to. It took me a while before I noticed, because I was just saying there is something missing here, but I just couldn't put my finger on it, But anyway, so any other question?
Here.
Yes.
What is the size of the aquarellas? Are they big? They are small. What is the size of the object?
The object, they are different sides. There is actually one that I wanted to. I just didn't know how to put it on a slide. It was Semana Santa. It was just like those pieces that are folded. It was just like this wide, like almost 50 centimeters, Yeah. And so I just didn't know how to, but that is the largest I have seen, because most of it are just what they call estampas. So maximum they are just this size, And now one of the replicas, some of the replicas are much larger, because it is funny, even though he didn't live off the dividend of his arts, he had many followers, even European followers. In Latin America, quite a few, but in Europe he had quite a few followers. An individual who just captured, literally, by his art, decided to do the same. That's what also makes it very challenging to do research on Pancho Fierro. So you have to go to really to some specific sites, location, like Leningrad. You know that's authentic. In the Hispanic society, you have a mixture. When you have some that are stamped, you kind of to state authenticity, but that's problematic because in some cases you don't have the paratext, the subtitle, or the explanation are missing. So was it genuine Pancho Fierro? So that's what we are challenging. And but the thing is that I like very much his body of work. As you can see, very simple, and what Quigley called the act of expressions here are very clear and very direct. You just, sometimes you get it, other time you have to guess, mostly if you are not attuned to the culture. That also speaks volume that needs that. What is, for example, I think that it is fascinating La Tapada. For those who are studying tourism, who are studying fashion design, etc., etc. What does it mean in terms of fashion? And how also the trend, our behaviors, because for the saya, the women had to adjust it in a certain way so that it would show their body. So what does that mean? All of that, etc. And so that also takes us to look at the notion of beauty. How can one determine that a person is beautiful just seeing one eye? What does it mean? But not only I'm talking about women, but I'm talking about men. How do they see? What is their concept of beauty? What if the woman, because only enslaved women, African women, could show their face? Did showing their face devalue you or not? I don't know. But that is a matter that could be discussed, a matter of research, and an excuse to travel to Peru and to interview folks. Right? Okay. All right. Not sure if there are more questions, but... Thank you. Thank you.